Hey everyone, welcome to this week's exercises. This week we're going to talk about a technique used very commonly throughout a lot of different websites out there called CSS sprites. Now, what is a CSS sprite? Well, a CSS sprite is a way to combine all of your interactive images into a single image for use on a website. And why is this something you want to do? Well, think about it like this. We talked about before how you can do rollover effects, right? If we remember back, we did this in the Compass Tours example, right? In that example, we had what? 4 navigation items, and each time you interacted with a navigation item, it loaded a new image, right? So that's a total of 8 images to make that interaction. That means that in order to load that site, you'd have to go from your device, whether it's your phone or your browser, to the internet, download the first graphic, download the second graphic, download the third graphic, the fourth graphic, the fifth graphic, so on and so forth. Now, for small graphics, this isn't a problem, but as your sites get more robust and have more graphics on the page, having to do so many back and forths between a client and a server to download all the graphics can introduce some latency in your site. And as we all know, if your site appears to be slow, people are not going to be patient and they're going to leave. So as your sites get larger, you want to start using various techniques in order to be able to make it seem to perform better and to function better. And CSS sprites is one of those. Now, basically, like I said, a sprite is a means to be able to combine multiple small images on your site together to be able to create a certain effect. Now, I have a couple examples here of common sprites, which I want to kind of show to you to give you a range of what they can do. Okay, and the first one is something that I included in today's exercises, so I'm just going to bring this up here. And you'll see basically this is a great example of using a sprite. You'll see I have a series of social media icons here. I have Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, I believe that's Flickr and YouTube, right? And you'll see when I interact with them, essentially what happens is I get a little bit of a lesser opacity on that, right? So if I take a peek at this, I'm just going to pull this down. What I'm looking at above is the actual sprite sheet for this example. Now each of these icons actually uses this same graphic as the background image, and the structure to put this together is an unordered list, okay? And I can show you this if you want in the code. So if we go here, let's see, I believe this is the code here in brackets, right? And just to demonstrate, I will quickly take out all of the stylings here, and I'll say cut, and we'll do a quick save on that. And let's see if I can refresh that quickly. Yeah, there you go. So you'll see now this is a standard ordered list, which, as we talked about a couple times already in this course, is the best practice for putting a navigation structure together, right? Whereas when we add in this sprite, okay, it becomes much more interactive and visual because it's graphically based. Yet, instead of having to load, there's 5 examples here, so this would be a total of 10 graphics with the interaction, meaning that I have the state that it's in when it loads, and then when I interact with it, okay? So essentially, this is being done with one graphic, and like I said, we kind of see that right here. There's one graphic here that gets put on each of the list items as the background image, and then essentially the position of that background image is moved to display a certain icon. Now, this is a common technique, and it is a little bit more complicated than some standard techniques we've talked about in this course, but very useful, especially as you start building for environments that are going to become a little bit more bandwidth heavy. Coming up with techniques in order to be able to improve performance on the site is going to make the experience from a user perspective much stronger than if you have latency and you have to wait for graphics to download. Users will see that and sense that, and using techniques like this are often very smart to do that. So I came up with a couple others here just to take a peek at them. So let me bring this back up. So the next one is an example of a sprite that uses animation. Very common strategy, okay? This is actually where the history of the term comes from. Okay, it kind of comes from back in the day. The original video games back in like the mid 70s used to use sprites or all the graphics for the character on a single image that would be loaded into memory, and then only parts of that image would be displayed at a certain time. This is the same concept of a sprite that we're looking at here. This uses CSS animation. We haven't talked about this yet. It's a topic of conversation for next class, but it is something that you can do with sprites, and it is very effective. Just to demonstrate quickly here, let me pull this down here. So the sprite sheet for this example, I believe, is this one right here. Okay, so you'll see that each step of the running cycle is part of this sprite sheet, and you'll see that basically you're only seeing this part right here. I don't know if you could see that or not. And then it's moved over time to make it appear to be an animation. Okay, now I have one more here, which I'd like to demonstrate here. Similar idea. Okay, that's this one right here, a little Pac-Man model. Okay, so basically this sprite sheet is very similar. It's a lot smaller. This is a 4-step sprite sheet. So I'll bring this up right here. This happens to be a vertical sprite sheet. And essentially, you'll see the different steps. It's actually 3 steps. I apologize. You'll see the different parts of the process. Each step of the animation is there. Okay, so there's one really famous sprite that I'd like to talk about, which kind of actually made this a very popular thing to use in web design, and it exists on the Apple website. Okay, this navigation here, I believe, is a sprite. All right, and we're going to talk about how to recreate this sprite. Okay, you'll see as you interact with it and roll over, you get the gray letters here. We're going to talk about how to create this sprite and how to use the CSS in order to be able to do this in our next video. So please tune in to part 2 of this, and we'll talk about putting the sprite together. Thank you.